I don't want to talk necessarily about Shalom Din. I want to read to you one more thing from this Facebook page. Shalom Din is a former Skver Chassid. Do you know where Skver is?
It's a sect.
It's a sect that came from Europe.
Yes.
But they live today near Monsey, New York.
Okay.
They have a town called the town of New Square. Skver is the same thing as square. And it's a full-blown Hasidic town. The mayor is Hasidic, the fire department is Hasidic, the police department is Hasidic, everything is Hasidic.
What's the name of the town?
New Square. It's a little, I think it's officially a village in American, it's before Monsey. It depends where you are driving from, I guess. But
from New York.
Is that where Divorce stayed last year?
Not
No,
there, but she stayed in Monsey.
I know in Muncie, but not in there.
Now, New Square, the first mayor of New Square was a man named Rabbi Daniel Goldstein. Rabbi Daniel Goldstein was my mother-in-law's father.
Oh my.
The first mayor of New Square was my wife's grandfather.
Okay.
They needed a mayor who was able to read and write English, unlike the rest of the Hasidim. And the Rebbe, the first Skver Rebbe, originally started as just a way to get away from the hustle and bustle of New York and build a community on their own Hasidic values. The community today is not led by that Rebbe. He passed away many years ago. It's led by a new Rebbe who, I'm going to hold back my opinion on the dealings and the management of that place. Suffice it to say that, according to my wife, I'm sure there are those who would beg to differ, and I'm sure those from her family as well. According to my wife, that was not the vision that this community was supposed to turn out into. It turned out as a group of a few American Jewish families that went to start a township to one of the most radical Hasidic groups in the United States. And the only reason you haven't heard of them is because they don't mix with anybody. And whereas you may have heard of some other guys because they go on the news or they protest Israel or whatever it is, these guys just do their own thing. They don't want to know you, they don't need to know you, they don't care really much about you. And at the beginning of this entire discussion, I don't have anything for or against New Square. I'll just tell you that when I was there once in my life, I felt like I was experiencing a different religion. Not a different sect of my faith, like I do feel in other places, an entirely different religion. And I think that if you don't approach this story with that knowledge that I don't believe I'm talking about another Jewish group. I'm talking about a group that is Jewish, but has their own, not just understand, I don't know, its own thing. It does its own agenda is a word, but its own philosophy, its own teachings, its own. You can't come with a book and say the Jewish books say this. They'll say great, good for you. That's not the way we do things. And so for me, if I can't challenge someone with a Jewish text, then that means that they don't hold up to the same ruler or standards or tests that we do. So I don't have anything against them. I don't know them well enough to have something against them. All I can tell you is that this Shalom Din is not the first guy who's ever broken out of the community. And not the first guy who shared his stories. And he's not the first guy who's ever run away from a certain religious extremism that exists in every religion, but in our religion it's becoming all too common, and that's what I care about. There are other groups like Satmar that you may have heard of, or Neturei Karta, which is not even a group, it's like a few families that band together. You may have heard of such groups. I'm not here to discuss Hasidim even, but I want to read to you a Facebook post that got me into this feeling the whole week. Motzei Shabbat, I read this, and I don't even know if I'm going to be able to read it with a straight face. I'm going to tell you what he wrote. He wrote a book, All Who Go Do Not Return. Mm-hmm. And this book has become a bestseller everywhere. I mean, this is it's his own, it's like a memoir. His own life story, what he went through, breaking out of the group, living in the group. 7 years, I think now you're going on 9 years that he hasn't seen his children. I don't care which religion we're talking about, but a family is a family, and I can understand that there are laws of custody and there are courts and such things, but I'm not one who believes that cutting off a person, especially not because of any religious ideal, is a value. But I want to read to you what he wrote. It's what got me riled up. I actually wasn't able to finish reading his book, so those of you who are going to read his book, it was too heartbreaking for me. I gave the rest to my wife to read, and she filled me in on the details. I wasn't able to handle it. But let's take it from the top.
How did she speak people-wise?
It's a great question. I'm sure if you have a smartphone, you can actually put it into Wikipedia. New Square, village of New Square, you'll find it. Thousands of people. So Shalom Dean posted this on Friday. So he's talking about Thursday night. He said, yesterday I saw my 2 eldest daughters. For 8 years I waited for this, wondering if it will ever come, wondering if this was forever. Yesterday my second daughter, Frady, got married. I was not invited to the wedding, and I didn't plan to go, but in the end, encouraged by friends and family to just show up, I put on my suit, ordered an Uber, and took the hour's drive up to New Square. I arranged with my brother to meet me, and we arrived around 1 a.m., just before the mitzvah tanz was to begin. Do you know what a mitzvah tanz is?
The first dance.
At the end of Hasidic weddings, they have a dance with the Rebbe and with the family.
And with
The bride holds this long rope almost, cord, and they dance with the cord.
Yes, I know it.
A custom only existing inside of Hasidic circles. And it starts very late at night. So 1 a.m. is a normal time for a mitzvah dance to start at a 6 or 7 o'clock wedding.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Right? I was greeted at the door almost immediately by a man I call Shragi in my book. Real name is Yoeli Breyer. Don't hold me to pronunciation. Who ordered me to leave, would not allow me to enter the wedding hall, and threatened to call the cops. I told him he could call if he liked, but I wasn't leaving. He screamed wherever I turned, "You write dirty books and dirty articles. Your children don't want you here." I didn't want to ruin my daughter's wedding, and I knew that by entering the hall proper, I would create chaos. So I lingered in the lobby where for over 30 minutes this maniac hovered wherever I stood, screaming, shouting, harassing. "You write dirty articles in Treif magazines all over the world. You embarrass your children." I don't know where he gets his information from. The man is a complete illiterate. This is the man who I've had to deal with all along, the man who orchestrated my children's estrangement from me, has been telling them horrible things about me, how I chose to live my life, continues to lie to them outright just to get them to stay away. All the while, other men came out of the hall to greet me. A group of men even started dancing with me, right there in the lobby. All the while, Breyer circled and screamed like a maniac. At one point, the groom heard I was there, as did my oldest son-in-law, neither of whom I'd ever met. And they came out to greet me with big smiles and thanked me for coming. One man wanted to know just one thing. "Nu, did you bring a check for the Chassan Kala?" He tapped the back of one hand and the palm of the other. "Nu, did you? Give me, I'll make sure they get it." Zisha Schmelzer, who has a cameo in my book as Zisha Schnitzler, asked for a donation at my son's bris in exchange for a blessing. He was there too, asking now again for a donation in honor of my simcha, in exchange for a blessing. My blessings work, you know it. He hasn't changed in 16 years. Other men came out, shook my hand, asked me to come inside. All the while, Breyer stood shrieking that if I didn't leave, I was ruining my daughter's wedding, that he was going to call the cops. It was truly a surreal experience. On the one hand, there was friendliness and genuine warmth. On the other hand, was such cruelty by a handful of maniacs, led by Breyer and some others in my ex's family, who kept shouting insults. It was infuriating and comical and crushing all at once. I wondered at one point if he might be right, that my children perhaps didn't want me there, and that the commotion was unsettling to many of the attendees. Soon after, however, my oldest son-in-law came to me and said, "Tziri wants to see you," his daughter. She would meet me outside. It took me a moment to recognize her, but no longer than a moment. Of course it was her. What do you say to a beloved child you haven't seen and spoken to in 8 years, whose entire adolescence you were barred from, whose wedding you missed? What do you say when there are so many questions, so many things to say, all of them urgent, but your mind is dizzy with the suddenness of it all? What came out of my mouth was, "I've missed you." I felt my insides crack. Last time we spoke, she was 13, angry and sullen. Now she was 21, beautiful and grown and smiling, yet still very much the same person. We barely had a few seconds. My brother, who was with me, snapped a couple photos with his phone, which wouldn't do the moment justice. And before we knew it, the Breyer fellow was right next to us, screaming at my daughter for daring to speak with me. Frightened of him, she froze, and I turned to ask him to leave. His yelling continued, and my daughter looked traumatized and overwhelmed, quickly ran off. I did not get to see her again. There's a man named Lipa Schmelzer. Lipa Schmelzer is a Hasidic pop star who was also thrown out of the sect. He's actually the brother of the Zisha Schmelzer who was collecting money at the beginning.
Yes.
Lipa Schmelzer, I have mixed feelings about the man, but I like him. I appreciate his he's out there, he's crazy, he's brave. Put him in YouTube, you'll probably like him too. His style of music is very unique. But he got out of the community. He's still Hasidic, still dresses Hasidic. He goes to Columbia University today. I mean, he works hard from the ground up. He had to study like elementary school, secular education, and up on his own. His family's with him. His kids came with him. So later, with the help of the tzaddik of our generation, my ex-brother-in-law, Lipa Schmelter, that's the singer, my Frady, the bride, came out. Her mother and some others tried to prevent her, but Lipa persisted. I was stunned when I saw her. She looked beautiful and so grown up. It was hard for me to reconcile it with the image of her as a little kid. I told her how radiant she looked, what a terrific guy her groom looked to be, and how happy I was for him. Also, how much I think of her every single day. Now, too, Breyer was back beside us, screaming for me to stay away from her. I told her I loved her. She leaned in close to me, put her hand on my arm, and I couldn't resist and hugged her. Despite my brother hissing at me prior, no hugs. Her groom stood nearby the whole time, beaming. Make sure she gets this, I said, and I handed him an envelope with some letters and gifts and cards that had been returned unopened over the years. Then she disappeared back inside. It hurt that I didn't get to see my younger ones, Chaya Suri, Akiva, Hershey, 18, 16, 14. Chaya Suri was surrounded by women who wouldn't let anyone close to even try. A couple of people tried to get my sons to come out, but they chose not to. I left feeling at once uplifted, sad, angry, joyful, and anxious. The kind of mixed emotions that keep your adrenaline going and leave you awake in bed for hours afterwards. Joyful for the good, sad that it had to be this way. Angry at those who sought out of pure malice to inflict unnecessary pain. Anxious about where this will all lead, and the if, when, where, how of the future. Anxious about doing what's right not only for me, but for them, for everyone. It lasted only about an hour. I got home at 3 a.m. Now, a day later, I'm still processing, still shaking, still feeling the insanity, but also seeing the bright, gleaming ray of hope.
That is so sad.
Isn't this an example of a cult? I mean, this is what a cult is, isn't it?
I don't have the exact textbook definition of what is a cult,
No, from what we've heard.
but
Yeah.
a lot of things could probably align up with each other. And I told you the agenda here today, I'm not bashing Hasidim, I'm not putting down Skver even. I just sat there on Saturday night reading this Facebook post. And like I told you when I was at Skver this summer, I just didn't feel like it was the same religion that I'm a part of. It didn't feel like it was another sect. I felt like this is a different religion. And I've been uneasy, I've been not at rest since Saturday night. It hasn't done good for me. Probably the reason I put down the book also. I like to think I'm tough. I can read tough things, but there's some things that just I can't do. And as a person who's dedicated my very short life until now to making sure that Hashem's Torah gets out into the word of sanity, of balance, of joy, of beauty, from what I find in the Torah, goes out to the world. And then I met with the exact opposite of this, all in the name of my religion. I don't feel tricked, I don't feel lied to. I wasn't tricked and lied to. I feel so angry that there's somebody out there who claims to speak for my Judaism, for my Torah, for my religion, and this is what it looks like.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Devorah's mother, it's her family, her father's family. Are they still part of it?
Almost all of the family doesn't live there anymore. Some do. My wife's grandmother lives there, but she's not an active member of the community. She's an elderly lady.
Okay.
All of my wife's aunts married out into other Hasidic communities, so they live in Borough Park and other such places, and a few brothers, like uncles of hers, that are. I'm not going to tell you the community is bad, and I want to tell you what attracts me about Sholem Din. And I've read many memoirs from Hasidic kids who've broken out of their sect. There's no shortage of such. I just spoke to a librarian recently who told me there's actually a whole book club of people who read books of Hasidic kids who broke out of the community. There's clearly enough to go around. He's the first one that I read that wasn't angry. He wasn't spouting venom. And I don't blame somebody, by the way, for spouting venom. If that's what I would probably spout even more. But when a person comes off as a sane, balanced person, that's when it's actually convincing. In this video, he didn't sound angry. He sounded very sad. Very, very, even reminiscences. Like, this is the building that I went to school in.
Yes.
You notice that nobody in the street said hello to him?
Nobody.
Everybody knows who he is. Everybody. This is the kind of community where there's not a last name you
And
don't
that
know.
was New Square that we
Yeah,
saw.
where he was.
And so anybody can walk into this area.
Sure, it's a real,
not
it's like,
He was showing Williamsburg.
that was Williamsburg? And that's, okay, good.
Williamsburg in that
Okay.
video.
He did once, there's a video of him though in New Square, and he does get followed around and pushed out of town. Remember in New Square? The police are Hasidic too.
Yes,
Remember I told you that.
and the fire and everything else.
Yeah.
I think, I'm almost through with the book. I think there's another way to look at what you're saying has taken you down a little bit deep into your heart to disturb you. Why is a group like this formed? You have to ask yourself that. What's the goal? What is it they're trying to accomplish? I think that when a group of people start something like this, they're saying, we want to arrive at a certain place in our prayers, or we want to live a certain pious way so that, and you fill in the blanks. And so that's the agreement they make with each other.
Is it almost like the Black Panthers? Is that what you're saying?
No,
I don't know about the Black
imagine in a very, I'm going to cut Paulette.
Sure.
Imagine I'm starting a new synagogue. And it's a small group of us. And we say, hey, we want our prayers to look a certain way, to feel a certain way. We want lunch to look, we want this kind of food. We want this, everything is, just because that's what we like. And in 2016, we're all in agreement. The question is what happens 20 years down the road when there are new people. And our kids have kids.
That's
They don't buy into it. And the question is, so do I say, well, you're now out. I'm cutting you off because you're not conducive to the flavor, to the feeling, to the type of prayer, to the type of food, to the type of community life that we want. It's right. It didn't come out of, I don't believe it was a malicious intent to create a cult. There are such people in the world. That's not what's happening here.
Exactly.
But these are people that have been trained a few things. One is that the outside world is evil, purely evil. And not just the outside non-Jewish world. The outside Jewish world is not for them. Meaning neighboring Muncie, which you might find to be religious and radical, is not religious in New Square. It's not for them. Like, oh, your kid moved out to Muncie? Hashem should save you. We should put him on our Tehillim list. Right? I'm not exaggerating. No. This is their lifestyle. And he was right when he said that there are people there that are very happy there. There's those people who this is what they want, and they sign up for this. They want prayers to look like this, and classes to look like this, and they like that. When I went in there were 2 signs in Yiddish on every street. They had no idea what they said. And I asked my wife, and it said mention men, and it said Frau, woman, men and women. They have 2 different signs, and it's part of they all agree that they want men on one sidewalk and women on another sidewalk. And that means that if I were to walk out of the house with Dvorah, which I didn't give them the pleasure of in New Square, I would be walking on one side of the street, and she would be walking on the other side of the street. And that, to everybody who lives there, is normal. But what happens when someone's kid thinks that's ludicrous?
And run it off.
Oh, Elkanah, he has to be in the street.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Is he walking with his father?
He's with his mom because he's in a stroller, but there'll be an age where you transfer over.
Is this a group that's broken off from the group in Mea Shearim, or where are they?
Their Rebbe lives in New Square.
Oh, so
this is their headquarters.
It's only this.
They have little enclaves in Williamsburg and in Brooklyn, all kinds of different places, in Borough Park, and I'm sure they have, but they're not. This is their headquarters. I'm sure they also have in Israel, of course.
That's what I'm asking.
Really?
So, I didn't hear the very beginning. I'm not sure what this guy did that got himself excommunicated, but it seems to me like a group like this, I don't know what are they worshiping? Themselves? Their own desire to form their own identity, or they're worshiping Hashem. Hashem would never condone what they're doing.
They would beg to differ.
Mm-hmm. It's the ultimate strict interpretation.
It's not a strict interpretation. It's a misinterpretation. Hashem never said hate your brother because he's not like you.
Never says.
That's true.
But they don't see that.
Well, then that's their shortcoming. It's not their virtue.
Say we.
There are narrow minded.
I mean, we on the outside feel that I'm with you on this entirely. Don't think that I'm arguing with you. If you came here and I was telling you guys, I think this is what I want University City to look like in 20 years, then you should probably leave at this place now. That's not what I'm telling you. I agree with you.
You could say that, but as long long as you were open to understanding that Hashem didn't tell you have to do it like this, you have to be open and accept human beings.
So maybe now is where you delve into a different question. The question is, how empowered am I as a Jew when it comes to interpretation of my religion? I'll explain what I'm telling you. You've had many times around this table where I've brought up an issue, and I've brought to you as many different angles as I can. And I don't hide what it is that I feel or what I'm probably leaning towards. But at the end of the day, the ball's in your court. You want to go this way, that way. You have now the background information. Sometimes the education is not that. The education is, we have a Rebbe, or substitute it, a Rosh Yeshiva, or we have a principal of a school, or we have a personal rabbi in the family, or we have a Rebbitzin. Put in whatever title goes there. And it's not our job to interpret Jewish. They are the ones who do it for us. And so we trust them, and we follow them. And that's the most ideal system in the world. And they will pull out text proofs from right and left about following leaders and about not straying from what your rabbis tell you. And there are no shortage of such text proofs. They can also counter texts as well. But to everything in the world you can prove. You should know that it's an important rule our rabbis write in the Talmud. It says, Kan derechim. Kuf nun. What's the gematria of kuf nun? 100 and nun? Gematria? Nun is 50. 150. Say Chazal, Kan derechim letaher et hasheretz. There are 150 ways in Jewish law to make an insect kosher.
And that includes separating family and ex.
No, what the Talmud says is that anything in the world, if you are a smart person, you can justify rationally, logically, religiously. There's nothing in the world that you cannot rationalize for. And Chazal, why are Chazal making this statement, and why 150? I'm not delving now into that specific statement. But when I first learned this by Rabbi Peretz said, this is the reason why logic on its own, or religion on its own, or text on their own are not enough to prove anything. You also have to have a very healthy personality. You have to have a very healthy soul and a heart and a mind that interprets such texts. Because the interpretation is up to whoever's interpreting it. And if the person who's interpreting them is a crooked person, remember that guy, he wasn't a rabbi, but he pretended to be a rabbi. Recently, I went out against another rabbi who pretended to be a rabbi, and it's because of such a story. There was a man in Israel, Eli Orchen was his name. He had a little radical group of people who came back to Judaism. And he was a child abuser. But not even sexually, physically. He loved torturing people and hurting people. And people that would come to him for advice, he would just recommend, yeah, sure, I don't want to tell you the things that he recommended, but all kinds of terrible ways, criminal offenses, to hurt people's children. And the moment the Israeli Shabak, the FBI, got on his case, the man fled the country. They found him a few years later, and they extradited him. He was hiding away in some South American country. Shaved off his beard, wasn't wearing a kippah, didn't keep kosher, nothing. It was all just. And when such a person, you put the interpretation solely in this man's hands, he will bring his abuse to the table. He will bring his sick mind to the table. And that's why you really have to question not just a person's credentials, but a person's personality. When you're joining together with someone on any kind of, not just on a spiritual road, but on any road, everything is up to interpretation. And you have to make sure, is this the kind of person that interprets things most in line with what I believe Hashem would want, what I believe my soul needs, what I believe is good for society? Those are things that you must ask. And so in such a world where the questions, doesn't make a difference what it says in the books. It's not your job to question.
It's not?
And this is the mentality in the group.
In that system.
In their system. But I can't understand that the American government allows them not to have a proper education.
You have to know one thing about the American government. The American government is terrified of being accused of being a racist or sexist or anti-Semitic or any such things. And you're talking about people who really know the law well. These are not people they've come to a place. You have to imagine what this looks like. And I don't want to talk about the corruption of such a town, where they come in and all of a sudden they need, public schools are part of a government budget. So if you're in a town that's made up all of Jews, your public school could be religious. Do you know that?
Yes.
The reason why your public school is not religious here is because you have all kinds of religions going to this public school. But they have a public school that teaches in Yiddish, funded by the state of New York. And that's okay, because that's the law. The law is that if, just like you would be in a place where everyone spoke Spanish, and so they have an English second language program. They have an English second language program too.
But they also had a tutoring program to teach English and mathematics, funded by New York State government. And when they would hire these young men to tutor the kids in basic English and mathematics, they didn't do it. They wrote down on their report, getting better in English, but they weren't teaching them English. They were collecting their, whatever it was, 13 bucks.
So like I told you at the beginning here, and Paula's right, if you want to read the book, by the way, you will probably, All Who Go Do Not Return is the fitting title for the book. I don't want to talk about the corruption in this community because there's a lot to say, and I just come off sometimes as like I have an agenda against them. I want to tell you where I'm coming from. There's a story in Israel about a guy who made Aliyah from Morocco. And he's hanging out with his friends. This guy had never seen a train before. He'd never seen a bus before. It was like a new world for him. He came out of some desert. They brought him to Israel. He's hanging out with his friend, who's an Israeli boy. And they come to these train tracks. And his friend says, "Come, lay down on the train tracks. Let's look up at the sun. Let's look up at the clouds." They're laying there. So there's a toot. And one boy jumps up and runs away. But this kid, the new immigrant, doesn't know what the sound is. He gets hit by a train. Terrible story, right? A year and a half later, the guy gets out of the hospital. He comes home, and his whole family makes a welcome home party for him. And there's a welcoming party. He's in the middle of giving his speech. I'm so glad to be saved. And someone had put up a kettle of tea in the kitchen. And the kettle of tea went, toot. You know those tea kettles, right? He takes a baseball bat and breaks it, starts smashing the kettle. The guy went nuts in the hospital. He went crazy. So what are you doing? He said, you have to kill these things when they're small, because when they get big, they're very dangerous. Tea kettles don't turn into trains. But small problems become big problems. I was taught from a very young age by my parents and later by my rabbis, no problem that you see in the world today that is big started as a big problem. It always started as something that you tolerated, something you were respectful of, something that you were kind about, something you said, oh, you know what, everyone has the right, everyone has the freedom, I'm looking the other way. Everything in the world starts there. And the question is, where does it avalanche to? Where does it, it's a snowball effect. It rolls and rolls and rolls, and suddenly it's this monster you don't know what to do with. I'm not a teacher of politics, and I'm not a teacher of law, and I'm a Jewish teacher. And when I look at the Jewish world, and I see avalanches, I see such communities that are, they weren't born yesterday. It's not a new community. These people didn't wake up one night and boom, this happened. But we as a Jewish community allowed for such a thing to happen. And you might say, out loud, every one of us is guilty for letting such a thing happen. Every single one of us. And that's what I came to talk about today.
How do you stop it?
That was my
Why
point.
are we responsible?
I'm going to read to you something.
What did this guy do that he came excommunicated?
Okay, yeah, it's a good answer. A good question. You're probably blown away at the answer. He started listening to the radio.
Okay.
And then to talk shows. And then got interested and went to libraries. And read non-Jewish books. And then he got internet access. And then he discovered all kinds of things they didn't tell him in New Square School. Questions about God, questions about religion, questions about... And here it's not a question of are there answers to those questions. Simply, he was never introduced to anything outside of his worldview. And the moment he discovered that, and he's clearly not an unintelligent man, he was just... I have one of my best friends. His wife works in an office that does grant writing in Israel. And her boss is a very accomplished woman. She owns this whole big company in Israel, U.S., Canada. The boss's husband is like a religious Hasidic former yeshiva guy who had never received one day of secular education in his life. When she came to the office, this man had one corner in the office. Clearly his wife was the one who made the money. And all he did, I'm not exaggerating, all he did was print out Wikipedia articles from his computer. Any topic in the world. Sun, stars, how they pave sidewalks. Anything in the world you could come up with. He was printing off of his computer. I guess someone didn't tell him you could just buy an encyclopedia. But he was printing articles. And this man could not, he was like devouring information. Devouring. This person's a highly intelligent person that was raised in a place where they told him, you're not allowed to know anything about anything. You cannot know about the outside world. You can't know anything that's not Jewish. You can't. This mentality is not. It's not like a Jewish ISIS mentality. This is a mentality that is deeply entrenched in many, many Jewish communities, probably starting somewhere in the world where the non-Jews were our enemies and were massacring us and killing us, and we developed this very healthy feeling of we have to stay away. It's not safe for us to mix in. Many Jews have never gotten out of that mentality. I'm going to leave there's an ethnic divide here also between different Jewish communities and their relationships with the non-Jews around them. Suffice to say that I'm a newcomer to this world of religious extremism. And I wasn't raised on the knees of such a Jewish philosophy, and when I met it, frankly, I was very surprised. But then I went from being surprised to realizing that I'm outnumbered, and very quickly retreated, and that's why I'm talking to you about what I'm talking to you today. It's supposed to be Purim. I want to talk about Purim. I want to talk about Megillah. I'm not going to do that today. I'm putting out my book, Yehi Shalom, this week again, the book that we reprinted. And I almost decided, we'll let it go out of print, we'll wait a few years, we'll become a thing, and we'll... Thank God, we sold a few hundred copies that we made the first time, and let's look at how much of a need is there really. And this summer, my wife went to Muncie, and she stayed in the house of a Rabbi Newman, a sweet, sweet, sweet man. They hosted my wife for 2 months in their house, with the child, like she was their daughter. It's the good people. And this Rabbi Newman has a friend. So what I do is when I come to someone's house, they do like that kind of favor. I don't have money for gift cards. I give a copy of my book with my inscription inside. Okay, I was there for Shabbat, and I flew back to San Diego. This man has a friend. I don't know what his story is, where he's on the religious level, but suffice it to say, he's not Muncie material. Okay? For the good, not for the bad. Just that's not where he is. And Rabbi Newman tells me that his friend, Izzy, stole his book. And he won't give it back to him. He won't give it back to him until I send him another copy. The problem is I don't have another copy to send him, because the book's out of print. Hence our fundraising efforts and Marlene's editing efforts and Rachel's editing efforts. And Marlene, by the way, this is the Marlene edition of my book, if you want to see.
That's the first one.
The first one. There's a second version of this one. And every single page, every note, I think it's tight because I take it to Marlene in public for this one. She is the reason why every mistake is fixed in this book without the day. And now we have to go to, so we're reprinting this week. And when I got in touch with this Izzy character, it's like, what's going on? Why are you so, this book was written for like a Sephardic clientele in mind, perhaps a little bit more religious bend. It's not a very spiritual book, I would say, mostly a religious book. And it's a book of Jewish law. And he said, I have never in my life read such a balanced approach to the laws of Passover.
Wow, what a compliment.
And I was very complimented. Because balanced is a word that I find is a compliment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm sharing this with you not to flatter myself, but to tell you that if this is the kind of
We'll
stuff.
flatter you.
Thank you. This is the kind of stuff that I got in high doses. Like this is 200 milligrams. I got like 10,000 milligrams every morning by Arav Peretz when I was in Jerusalem. And for this to go, so that means there's a really big thirst for this kind of thought. So I want to read you a quote that Arav Peretz writes in his book. I translated it into English inside of my book. That's an important one.
Can you say it in Hebrew too?
Yes. It's a very well used book.
Yes.
אולי תקראי בעברית בזמן שאני קורא באנגלית. זה הקטע הזה. Okay? I wish to express here feelings of pain and distress of straightforward Torah scholars. I know we fixed this up a little, Marlene, since then. Who are perplexed by the improper and incorrect paths on which those of our generation walk. This is Rabbi Yonatan writing. These are the excessive opinions, doubts, and suspicions which surpass the boundaries of proper justice and truth. There are those who are afraid to follow the halakha, as stated in the Shulchan Aruch, which has been accepted by the Jewish people from generation to generation. For they take into consideration an opinion opposite that of the Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law. This leads them to be stringent and add one stringency upon another stringency, resulting in an improper leniency or leniencies which stem from their improper stringency. Suffice they keep building towers of stringencies on top of stringencies. And this is exactly what Chazal saw, our rabbis saw, in their Ruach HaKodesh, the divine inspiration, has come true in our days. As they said, the Torah is destined to be forgotten from Israel. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai explains, they will wander to ask the word of Hashem, but they will not find it. They will not find clear halakha and clear Mishnah, clear Torah study in one place. It's cryptic. The Hebrew is much better than the English, but I want to explain to you what Rabbi Peretz is saying. He says, we're letting people get away with small crimes. We don't do this on Shabbat. We don't eat that. We don't wear that. We don't speak to those. We don't make a list of what we don't. And that saying we don't, it's a very nice one. It's a subtle hint for saying, I don't do it. I'm looking down at you because you do it, but I can't force it on you because America's a free country. I'll say it again. I'm looking down on you. I'm telling you what I do, but I can't force it on you. If I were to be able to, I would.
So you can fix the problem.
So comes the village of New Square. I could force it on you if you live in my village. Go to certain neighborhoods in Jerusalem. I could force it on you if you want to live in my neighborhood. Go to certain schools. I could force it on you if you want to come to my school. Go to certain synagogues. I could force it on you if you want to be a member of my synagogue. It's not a pitch for my synagogue. But I will make a statement that I'm going to ask Barry, whenever you listen to this, to take it out.
Barry. Oh, he's so funny, Barry.
Every one of you goes to a synagogue which embodies the moving of Judaism to a radical right wing. Every single one of you is part of a synagogue. That is part of a movement, that is part of an understanding, that is part of an approach that pushes Judaism to a radical right wing. Accept it or don't accept it, I'm just telling you from where I'm sitting. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, because you're right. Right now it's the kind of thing, okay, it's a cute couple, they're nice people, they do what they want anyways. That's fine. You're right. They're not imposing it on you. But it's very dangerous to empower people that have this kind of mentality that one day will be able, not in you, so it's going to be your kids. Now your kids going to be your grandkids. It's not them, it's going to be a school that they open up. And if it's not that, it's going to be a Sunday school that they run after hours. If it's not that, it's going to be the kids program in the synagogue. And if it's not that, it's going to be a class or a lecture or a topic or a speaker that they'll bring in or a video that they're going to show. It doesn't make a difference where it's going to come out of. But it will come out. And if there's one thing that I have been writing and speaking and screaming my lungs out about, is I will not be silent, and I know you will not be either. That's why I'm talking to you. I will not be silent so long as Judaism keeps moving in either extreme. The extreme of moving to the left, my personal responsibility, there are enough people screaming about that. There are not enough people screaming about the Judaism that's moving to a radical right. And if he's sleeping, you could check on him now, but as of not so long ago, he's sleeping. He went to bed at 1:30.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
1:30?
And I...
This morning.
Wow.
That's right.
Well, he did. We went to a gala banquet last night, and we came home at 10:45, and he said, listen, I know it's way past my bedtime, but I didn't spend enough time with you today. So he was not going to bed. And, okay, it's one of those days. He didn't have school today. I refuse to be quiet while I watch this happen. And so, yeah, am I preaching? I'm preaching a little bit. I'm not trying to be self-righteous, and I'm not trying to get you angry. And I'm not trying to get you to be upset at anybody who you're close with, any synagogue that you're happy about. That's not the point of today's conversation. The point is that if we keep being quiet, things will keep moving and moving and moving, and you will find yourself more and more and more estranged from a Judaism that I find to be beautiful, and other people will deliberately make ugly. I want to give you a test. Imagine where you were on a Jewish level as a child, in days that were happy. And they might not have been as religious as today or involved as today, but in days that were happy. Imagine Passover seders, imagine Hanukkah gatherings, imagine whatever it is that you're imagining. And think about how many of you still have those experiences today. How many of your local synagogues still celebrate that same kind of tradition that you were raised with? And don't answer my question, but you already have your answer. It's moving. The world is moving. Things are going. And even you think about Reform and Conservative and all kinds of other denominations are also moving in their own extremes to different directions. They're not what they used to be. In fact, I was just talking recently to a conservative rabbi, and I don't know, conservative is getting more orthodox as the time goes on, at least in my understanding of what's been going on.
Yeah.
And maybe as an orthodox rabbi that makes me happy, but as a sign of what's going on in the Jewish community, we're all shifting to one direction. I just spoke with my wife yesterday in the morning, we were learning. And just a simple thing, in yeshivas, most of the time the dress code is white shirt, black pants. Those who wish to self-express a little bit or don't buy into the rules of the system will challenge by wearing very dressy black pants or gray pants, because that's deviating. They might put on a blue suit instead of a black suit, because that's a deviation. They might wear a yellow, pink, green, blue shirt, because it's a button-down shirt. You can't throw me out of yeshiva for that. Now, today there are yeshivas that can, but where I went to school, it's not breaking the rules. You're just not willing to be that, and there's a word for it, comply. There's a word like comply. Conform. You're not willing to conform that much. And when I went back to the yeshiva that I went to, where I would say a good 40-50% of the boys used to wear colored shirts, meaning there was a healthy balance of conforming and non-conforming going around. I would say that number today is in the 10 to 15%.
Oh, it's lower.
And it doesn't mean anything. So what does it make a difference if somebody wears a white shirt or a blue shirt? Truthfully, it doesn't. But the world of conforming is just taking a larger and larger effect. And when I feel it as a rabbi, I was at an event yesterday, and I see the looks or the lack of hellos that I get from fellow rabbis because I refuse to conform to whatever absurd religious standard San Diego thinks it might have, by the way, because it doesn't have a standard. But it thinks it does, or a few of them think they do. And I realized that, whoa, they also want people to conform. I have no choice but to come and tell you, if you want to melt, go for it. But I don't find the highly intelligent people that you are willing to melt and willing to conform and willing to give it up. But if you don't fight the fight, and if you don't say the things that need to be said, and you don't do the things that need to be done, you're going to lose. I'm going to lose. We're going to lose. And what will happen? Nothing. Jews will be happy in New Square. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them will be happy with it. But for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30 who won't be happy, and are going to lose their kids, they're going to lose their wives, they're going to lose their synagogue or their parents. What it's like to lose. One thing a person has to lose their parents because that's the way the world works, unfortunately. People lose loved ones. But to lose a parent when they're still alive, to lose a child is a horrendous thing. But to lose a child when one is still alive and the child is still alive, what world justifies that? But that didn't come from this, like Paulette started. It didn't come from a desire to be a cult. It came from, I don't eat that on Passover. You can think I'm crazy. It comes from, we don't do that in our community. Can you justify that in Jewish law that you don't do that? No, it's just our custom. No, it's our tradition. What happens when your custom includes throwing people out of a community because they drive on Shabbat? What happens then? What happens when you tell a child they can't speak to their father because he doesn't believe in your definition of God anymore? And I can prove to you that in Judaism that wouldn't be okay, but you'll tell me, I don't have to comply to the Shulchan Aruch. It's not our custom. It's not my tradition. It's not what we do. These are words that all of you have heard in different contexts. But what they're essentially doing is setting up a framework that says Jewish texts are not important. But it's what we do that is important. And who's we? And who defines what we do? And who defines what is a tradition? And who tells me what is a custom? And who tells me what can trump Judaism itself? I don't know, that opens up a very big can of worms.
I think it's always been like that. It's just more extreme now in the Orthodox world that you're visiting and speaking about. Take a look at all the different Hasidic rebbes that existed all over Eastern Europe. They don't exist anymore. They were wiped out. They each had their own enclave. Whatever the Rebbe said, those followers did in whatever little villages and towns that the Germans wiped out. No longer
So
exist.
I want to tell Marlene, I'm going to get to you in a second. I read an article by Rabbi Shlomo Aviner. Rabbi Shlomo Aviner was asked, he said, which Hasidic group should I join? Like which one, which path? Now, everyone has their own unique way to pray, their own unique way to... And Rabbi Shlomo Aviner wrote something fascinating. He said, where does it say that Judaism has to be... Where does it say that every rabbi has to have his own unique path, his own way that he does things that nobody else does? Why can't we just do the Jewish thing first? He said, why can't you just say, I just want to be Jewish first? Why is the first step, which subdivision am I going to apply myself to? And he said, I question, it used to be that every righteous leader would say, I'm going to help lead my community, I'm going to guide them on the path of Hashem. They said, all of a sudden it's become, I'm going to be a leader of a community, and I'm going to guide them on the path which I've decided is unique. So why did that happen, says Rav Avina? When did that shift take place? It's great, you're right, every Rebbe does have his own path, I can't take it away from him, but when did that become a value? In fact, it used to be, there's a Jewish law. I want to tell you the Jewish law. I'm very strict about it when I go to other communities. And unfortunately, I've seen that the world doesn't really mind. There's a non-Jewish teaching that says, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. It's not a Jewish teaching. It's a Jewish teaching, no? The Talmud in Masechet Derech Eretz says, Al tiyeh yoshev ben ha'omdim, do not sit among those who are standing, V'al tiyeh omed ben ha'yoshvim, and don't be standing while the other people are sitting. Klalo shel davar, says the Talmud, the rule of the matter is, Al tishaneh min minhag hamakom. Do not deviate from the custom of the place in which you are in. Now the Vilna Gaon adds a footnote and says, obviously there are limits to this. If I'm with a bunch of murderers, I'm not going to become a murderer because that's what they're doing. But things that are not so important. When you're with another group, our rabbis have taught us that unity is more important than many other values that you might have. Truth is a value. I'm telling you, not things that challenge truth. But for example, I'm a Sephardic Jew and I go to Minyan and people are saying Kaddish. And my text of Kaddish is different than their text of Kaddish. So which one do I say? Mine, because it's mine? Or I'm in a synagogue where everyone else is doing something else. Why do I have to, mine? I'm going to stick mine out. Why? Now I'm happy to say that in my community, I don't care what people do aloud and what they say quiet. I don't care. But there are places where people care. And so I am very careful that if I'm going to say Kaddish, I say the same version that they're saying. Why should it be otherwise? My custom is to stand in certain parts of the prayer services. I go to synagogues where they sit. Why should I stand? I'm all for individuality. But there's some things that just, why shake the boat so much over things that are not important?
You can't teach respect and common sense.
You can't teach it. You can't teach it. But it's almost become a value of...
You're 100% correct.
It's almost become a value of, I'm going to come to somebody's house and tell them, well, I don't eat that, or I don't do that, or I'm going to go to a synagogue and tell the rabbi, well, the way I did... Great, good for you. There's a certain...
Isn't that a form of narcissism?
It is, but it's become an accepted form of narcissism.
But, let's go all the way back to the sages. You had...
But I didn't get to Marlene's question. I just want to get Marlene. So, yeah.
I just want to make a comment. I wonder, what is behind, what's driving this move to the left, this move to the right, this continuum movement? And I don't have the answer, but I'm wondering if, as we push God more and more out of the equation, if then the ego becomes more important, and then we have the results that you're talking about.
I think that's a big truth. When Hashem is divorced from any equation, so things automatically start. Our rabbis tell us that a man and a woman, how do you say a man in Hebrew? Ish. And a woman? Isha. Each of them has God's name inside. A man has a Yud, a woman has a Hey. Yeah, the name of God. When you take God out of a man and a woman, the only letters that are left? Esh, fire. Our rabbis say that a relationship that doesn't have godliness in it, Esh ochla, a fire will devour it. There's nothing to keep a person in check. See, at the end of the day, my wife and I are going to get into an argument. And one of us is going to have to give in. One of us. And we're not always going to be right. And more often than not, we're able to work it out ourselves, like big kids. And we'll sit down and we'll say, okay, so we're arguing about what we should teach Al-Hanan, or should we... What would Hashem want from us?
Yeah.
Now, we might have very different understandings of what Hashem might want from us, or if Hashem even cares about whether we give him peanut butter on his bread or not. Like whatever it is that. But the moment we say, let's think together because we're coming from the same place. We both want what is the best for this kid and what is best for Hashem. So now we're working on the same ticket. We're running on the same page. The moment I take God out of any equation, in my opinion, and Marlene's bringing up a good point, there becomes no one road that we're all trying to go down. One said, I don't want to go. I had this problem when I came to Israel. And I was there in the summer of the disengagement from Gush Katif. And I remember speaking to somebody who was for the disengagement, and I said, but what about Zionism? What about what the early Zionist teacher said about this and that and the third thing? And he said, get with the program. It's 2005. Nobody's a Zionist anymore. And that was an incredible thing, because I was running under the assumption, I was running under the assumption that if we're Zionists, so Zionist information is going to get us somewhere or not. But if we're not under that assumption, then... But Marlene, I don't think that's just it. I think that being balanced and in the middle of the road and being able to weigh things, and like, you can't teach people common sense and respect, that's true. But that being in the middle, being able to be sane and to be thought through, it takes a lot of work. Naturally, it's easy to be an extremist. I'm an angry person, so I'll go with the angry people. I'm a calm person, so I'm going to be the one who doesn't ever say anything. To be balanced means a little bit of both extremes and coming to the middle somewhere. It takes a lot of work. And work is not something everyone wants to sign up to do. And as a community, when we neglect to keep working on remaining balanced, inevitably we'll default back to whichever extremes we think we come from or we want to go to. And as time goes on and we work less and less, the idea of being in the middle road, like the Maimonides teaches us, becomes less and less of a value. We end up finding ourselves in very, very different places.
Baby.
And I'm telling you this now because Pesach is 2 months away.
Baby.
No. I was teaching a class.
Baby.
You want to watch videos of a baby?
Yeah.
Can?
Baby.
He loves seeing himself on the iPhone. The videos that we filmed with him yesterday in his crib, or just wants to see baby.
Oh, how cute. He wants to see the iPhone. Whatever you show him on the iPhone. That's right.
So,
You can't teach someone to say. You can't encourage people to be respectful. You can't encourage people to have say.
It's very difficult.
Baby.
no. So what I'm sharing is that I don't think I'm asking people just to be respectful. In fact, I'm asking you not to be so respectful. That's what I'm asking from you. I'm asking you not to be so respectful. Because right now you're respecting many people who are embodying this kind of fanaticism on a very small scale. And they are going to grow. And they will... Baby?
Yeah.
That's a little baby?
Yeah.
We'll have a telephone to Ima. Ima, do you have videos of a baby you can see?
Yes.
Okay. Mine is recording. Once something gets in his mind, that he's going to get it. So, I'm asking you not to be so respectful. A little bit to push people. To push movements that you're a part of, to push synagogues that you're a part of, to push communities that you're a part of. Have you ever thought of the world not from your own perspective? Have you ever thought of this religion not just the way it works for you? Have you ever thought about your kids, what's going to happen if they don't live up to your lifestyle? Some of you have maybe even seen it. Maybe some of you know older religious leaders whose kids aren't exactly where they wish they would be. How do they tolerate it? How do they handle it? How do they deal with it? I'm asking you to not let New Square happen again. And whereas I don't believe San Diego is going to look like men on one side of the street and women on the other side of the street, I don't believe that will happen.
How do you have control over that?
You have control over that because you empower the people which you affiliate yourselves with.
That's true.
I'll tell you a story. 2012. I didn't have a job. I was here in San Diego, pre my being a rabbi of a community. I was offered a contract from a TV station in Israel. A religious TV station that has rabbis lecturing. They wanted to set up a studio. I should give lectures a few times a week. They'll broadcast it on TV in Israel. I would make a nice amount of money. It sounded great. I parents were thrilled. Oh, look, our son, finally a rabbi can actually do something with his life. And no, my parents are very supportive of my career choice. Just questioning. So I looked into it, and I knew the organization before, and I said, I just have to do one more thing. Where does this organization stand on this topic, on that topic, on this political agenda, on this religious... I went through it. I came back to my parents and I said, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in working for someone, owing someone money, belonging to, affiliating with people who I cannot vouch for their vision. What do you care? So you work with them for a year, you'll make a salary until you get a better job, and at least people might hear about you. So, someone else might be able to do that. I can't. I have a problem. I'm aware of my problem. I can't do it. I cannot affiliate myself with people that I don't believe in their vision and their value system. And for years, these people became very famous. Very famous. Any rabbi who taught with them today is a personality. I can't say scholars, personalities. And this last month, they broke out into a war between them and another organization that does the same thing. And one of the people there, rabbis, mind you, sent one of his henchmen over to the other rabbi's lectures to beat him up. And what did that rabbi do? Righteous men. Sent one of his henchmen back to the other one to beat him up. And now there's lawsuits and claims of defamation of character and back and forth. And our hands didn't. We are not involved. We're righteous to you guys are the evil ones. And back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I'm thinking, I have nothing to do with it, right? I don't have. What if once upon a time my name was once affiliated with those people? Do you know what kind of embarrassment I have to go through now? I have to explain to you how once upon a time I looked up the people, I put their names on flyers of mine. And these people may really have done good work, and there are many good people affiliated with them that have done nothing wrong. But I find myself often refusing affiliation, not because I enjoy being independent. It's hard. You don't know where next month is coming from. But it's much better to run on your own ticket and be able to vouch for what you stand for, what you vouch for, than have to deal with someone else's ideology and someone else's system. So I'm a little bit happy here in San Diego that I found my own corner, my own people to hang out with on Monday mornings, my own chaver that learn and think the same, or not the same, but with the same understanding. It's not going to be that way forever, though. And one day we're going to have to make choices, and we're enabling and we're empowering entire movements of people to do things that are not okay.
I don't think there's anything new in that.
Nothing new in what I said?
No. There's nothing new in having these disparate communities with varying degrees of stringencies that they place on there. You know, the Baal Shem Tov starts a movement. He teaches 10 people, right? Those 10 men heard the same words come out of the Baal Shem Tov's mouth. Each 10 of them go out, right, to the different communities. And they teach basically what he said, but they
change
add
it
their
to suit themselves.
Well, no, it's not. No, that sounds nefarious.
Yeah,
They have
and I agree.
their own personality.
Yeah.
They have their own nature. You know,
and they impart that to their followers, and the people who are attracted to that come.
Right.
No, but I want to.
It grows from there.
No, you brought up a good example, and I promised in the beginning this is not going to be a Hasidic bashing discussion, and it's not going to be, especially now that my wife is home.